Hey everyone, welcome to the podcast. Back with Lauren. We had so much fun last week. We're going to do it again. So hope you guys are enjoying this new format, and we're going to get started. So Lauren, I'll let you kick it off.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Devon. So today we're going to talk about a topic that every business owner, regardless if you're big, small, what your business is, you're going to experience in your life, and that's selling it.
It's funny, when I first got into business, one of the pieces of advice that I got was, hey, so when you start your business, you need to ultimately have an exit in mind. And I guess I conceptually understood what they meant, but I didn't never sunk in at all. And then over the course of time, when our company began to grow, I was talking to various people, investment bankers. We'll talk about them a little bit later. But I was talking to some investment bankers. And, in my mind, I don't know really what I was thinking. It was just kind of, your head's down. You're an entrepreneur. You're just showing up every day as early as you can, working as hard as you can, as long as you can, trying to put dollars in the bank, right? And just do the thing. And so, you often don't have time to kind of pick your head up and look around. And I happened to be talking on the phone to this investment banker, and he goes, well, I said, so what are your plans to exit? And I said, well, I don't know. And he said, well, you do realize he wasn't being condescending. He was kind of educating me. He's like, you do realize that someday, whether you exit because they're putting you in the ground in a tombstone, or you plan ahead, but there is going to be a transition at some point.
Yeah.
And it kind of hit me like a ton of bricks, and it took me back to that very, one of those first conversations I had when, a mentor of mine was saying, hey, when you start a business, you need to have an exit in mind. And all of a sudden I was kind of like, oh, I get it. I'm like, I get it. So that was when I started to really run and operate my business with the understanding that at some point I was going to exit. And now, here I am years and years later, and I'm meeting with people. Mm-hmm. And just like you said, this is such a common topic. And people will come to me all the time and they're like, hey, Dee, I'm thinking about starting something new. Or I actually feel like my company's, doing really well and maybe I should sell it. Or, I'm bored out of my mind, or I want to retire, and I want to buy that sailboat and sail up into the sunset. What do I do? Mm-hmm. And it's it takes me back to my place, right? It's like, wow, once you kind of have that realization, it's like you're almost equally as lost, because now okay, I want to find this doorway, but I don't even know where to start.
Yeah. So do you think as a business owner, you wait until you have that realization, or you would say you start planning it even sooner than that? What would you advise?
I think, the best advice I could have is when you're starting a business and you're operating your business and you have a ton of energy and things are going great, you still need to have an understanding ultimately that, like I said, you're going to exit. The challenge that was given to me is listen, you're going to exit at some point. So make sure you build your build your business in a fashion that can happen, right? So I think while you're in it and you're operating it, having that understanding in mind will help you in overall decision making. It's kind of like a compass. I don't need an exact map, but I know what due north is.
Yeah.
So at least your compass is pointed north, right? You don't have to have exact precision, timing, directions, all of that. But Lauren, I think where you're getting at here is if you're starting to approach that point when you're like, hey, actually, this sounds great. I wonder how much my business is worth, because if I could get out of it today, I would, you know. Mm-hmm. Or hey, I am starting to reach this point where I look 5 years out and I go, I can't see myself doing this anymore.
Yeah.
Maybe you're at a point today where you're like, actually, this sounds great. I'd like to exit, this year. Mm-hmm. And this is where I'm like, okay, well, let's really get an understanding of what this is, because selling a business, there's some similarities, to selling a house. Some similarities, right? A lot of similarities that you can construe. But I would tell you, just like time. It takes time to get a house ready, to prep it to sell, and do all this. Like, a business takes a ton of time. And there's a big process that needs to go behind it, in my opinion, in order to kind of maximize your value, right?
Yeah.
And also leave something that's going to last, right? Like, you don't, like, just like people have pride in, the car that they sell or the house that they sell. You don't want to, sell something and, implode, or, the next day the water heater goes out, all these things. Like, you really are trying to do something special, get maximum value for it, and make something that leaves a legacy, something for the next generation or the next owners or whomever, or however you sell it. You want it to be done right. And if you rush the process, you rush the time, you're not going to get that value. And I also would say, once you kind of go, okay, Devon, this is resonating with me, right? I'm actually, I think I'm ready. Like, I think I want to start the process. Then the next thing I think that I spend a ton of time on is explaining, like, okay, well, what, who would potentially buy your business? How does, how would you go to market?
So let's say a business owner sitting there and is like, you know what, I do want to start thinking about it. What would you tell them then the first step to be? Walk us through what that first stage looks like.
Yeah, this is going to sound very elementary, right? So if you feel like I'm talking down, please, I'm not trying to do that, but really understanding your business itself. Like, what type of business are you? Because, you watch, these movies and you hear things like multiples, and you read, magazines and articles, and, oh, this sold for 20x, right? And you go, oh, great, also 20x what? 20 times what, right?
Yeah.
First off, let's talk about, well, 20 times what, right? Or, is it 20 times top line? Is it 20 times EBITDA? Is it 20 times profit? What is the multiple, right? Like, kind of understanding that. And then what does that apply to? Because different business types get different valuations, and different business types have different buyers, and different business type also have different people that would be involved in the process to kind of optimize your sale. And I think it's really important that you understand what you have, right? Like, do you have a family, like, lifestyle business where literally, you're kind of, it's based around you. If you go away, potentially the business goes away.
Okay.
Do you have a business that's like retail, right? Do you have a business that's all web-based? Do you have a software company? Is it a service company? What are these, at the core, what is your business and where is the value? And kind of once you understand that, then you can kind of, and you're real, right? You look at yourself in the eyes and you're honest with the type of business that you are, because, a software company that hasn't lost a client, in 5 years is going to get a different valuation than a roofing company, right? Now, here's the thing. That roofing company potentially could be a very, very, very successful roofing company. Yeah. And could actually have a top line higher, more revenue than, the software company. Yeah. Right? Yeah. And frankly, the software company could be losing money even, and the roofing company making money. But somehow that software company gets a higher valuation. Why? And understanding all of the levers and the motivations behind what buyers are going to want, what type of buyer is interested in you, how to do all of those different things. So I think the very first thing is really understanding your company itself.
What kind of questions would you ask yourself, or what would you look at to really get a true understanding of your company? Like, unbiased look at it.
Yeah. First off, there are folks that will come and give you appraisals, right? And there's a lot of, in 2024, 2025, there's lots of people that, are similar to me out there that probably run in your circles, that could probably sit down with you if you are willing to kind of, pull back the curtain a little bit, spend a half a day with them, show them the real financials, show them the dirty laundry, you got to get comfortable with it. And I've done this for lots of my friends over the years, lots of my friends. And then I've kind of given them my nickel's worth of advice, right? So I think there's certain folks that you could reach out to, probably within your network, that will give you some general ideas. But, the first thing that I would do when I was evaluating my company is say, if I don't like to use the term if you got hit by a bus, you know what I mean? But I like to say, hey, if you won the lottery, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, it's a good. But let's put it this way: if I went away today, what happens to my company?
Okay.
That's probably a great place to start, right? And if you go, well, if I went away today, the company goes away. Well, now you know, right?
Yeah,
So there's some
Okay.
value. There's some stuff you're gonna have to work on, right? The other question is how long has your customer base been with you, right? Like, so if you say like, well, hey, I went away today, the company still runs, right? Well, is that because you have reoccurring revenue because people are with subscriptions, or is it because you're you have this great location and it's a retail establishment and it's been there for 30 years and you just have repeat customers and very predictable revenue and you can kind of show this over the years? Is this something that let's say you're in the mortgage industry and you have these crazy highs and crazy lows, what is it that kind of composes your business? What's the good? What's the very attractive part of it?
Yeah.
And what are people going to perceive as the negative part of it? Maybe you're and again, I think I use this in some of my other podcasts, this plumbing company, right? So this is plumbing, it was service. They would do some new construction and plumbing too, but they could show over the course, I think the company had been around for 25 years. And they could show year over year over a year over a year over a year over a year growth, right? And there were some dips, minor dips here and there, with when construction went down or something like that. But they had, 2 divisions. So they had a service division and they had a construction division. So when one of them went low, the other went up, right? So you go, and by this time, the founder, had kind of hired a COO. He hired a CEO, and the founder was kind of there, but he wasn't running everything. So you could say, well, geez, the founder could go away, and this company still operates. And look at year over year, they have growth. And they have, if one thing goes away, if the construction has a down year, then service goes up, right? So there was all of these different things that made this, even though it was, quote unquote, just a plumbing company, actually a pretty sexy buy, right?
Yeah.
A lot of people are excited about this, right? And so I don't want people to think, oh, well, I have to be a software company to get good valuation or to be able to sell. That's not true. But you do need to evaluate where your value lies. Is it in your customer base? Is it in your location? Is it in your brand? Is it your product itself? Is it you have an incredible sales and marketing team? What makes, what is, if I was a buyer, what would you show me that gets me super excited?
Yeah. And this is not using the house sale analogy. So when my husband and I sold our first house, made it look beautiful. We, painted over some of the things that maybe wouldn't look nice, and then prayed that nobody noticed our crazy neighbor next door. And with that whole day when we do it, all those showings were please keep them inside. Please keep them inside. You would say this is not the same as a house sale where you do it when you're sitting and evaluating your company. You do have to sit there and be realistic of what are the good parts of our company and what are the bad parts, and what can I change those, or can I improve it, or is it just part of the industry? Do you agree with that?
Absolutely. And I do like that analogy, right? Because here's the thing. In business, we all have our skeletons in the closet. We all have our oh, please don't ask that question, right? And some things are good and some things are bad, right? What I do want people to understand is that, first off, I believe in full transparency, right? It's better off kind of, you personally dealing with the issue, but also as you're going through a process, kind of, and we'll talk about the process later, but really not necessarily being ashamed of those, but talking about how you deal with the crazy neighbor, right? Because that crazy neighbor could come out during escrow, right?
Yes.
And that, then all of a sudden the sale kind of blows up, right? But if you say, hey, listen, I'm going to be transparent. We have this crazy neighbor, but he only gets crazy if you have a party, that goes past 10.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, don't let the kids' soccer ball go in their backyard,
yeah,
right?
Exactly.
Right. And you're like, oh, okay, well, I don't have any kids, so that's fine.
Yeah.
And,
don't throw parties.
Yeah, we never have friends, right?
So,
Okay. So it's like, I think you kind of talk about those things, and then you're going to have the one buyer that comes in, they're like, oh, we have parties every Friday. Yeah, this is not going to be the house for them, right? And so you understanding that, trying to figure out how you deal with those issues, in your own company, and then present it in the best possible light. Because especially in some of these processes I'm going to talk about, these are very intelligent buyers, right? Like, I'm not going to say all of them are, right? So some of them, but like, let's say you're selling it to a family member. Well, by golly, you really want to make sure that they know what they're getting into, right? And let's say you're using investment bankers and people like that, and you're going to sell to private equity. These are very, very smart people, right? Like, you're not going to pull something over on them. And if you do, the sale's going to get blown up, right? Like, it's not going to happen, right? Yeah. So I think understanding that, again, this is all part of the process, right? For me, it was a 2-year process. I'll come back to that in a minute. I remember during that 2 years, like, I had a lot of things that, like, were skeletons in the closet. And I'm like, how am I going to deal with this?
Yeah.
Right? And it kind of forced me during the process to deal with those things, right? Like, you have, going back to the house analogy, you have a tree in the backyard that the roots are starting to get underneath the, the pool, right? And you're going, oh man, like, I'm going to have to deal with this when I sell it anyways, because they're going to ask about this question. I don't want this blowing up my sale. And by the way, if I own this house forever, I'm going to be happy I did it now, right? And so for me, the process itself made me better. Is it intimidating? Absolutely. Was it a ton of work while I was doing my day job of running my company? It was. It was like I literally had 2 different jobs going on. One was selling the company, the other was running the company. Yeah. So I took on another job, but I would tell you, even if we didn't sell, the company was going to be in a better place, because it kind of forced my hand to deal with a lot of the messy things. Yeah.
So now business owner, I've determined what type of company I have. What's the next step?
Getting to the point when you want to sell, right? Like, we were talking about this earlier, but for me, it was a journey, a bit of a journey. I had, started getting, when the company started becoming successful, one of the things that I recommend that you do as a business owner is to start to get your name out in marketing, right? Like, try to get it on various lists of, like, successful companies, fast-growing companies, best tech in the West, whatever it is, these various lists, like anything that is in your industry. So, let's say you're a plumbing company, like, get on those, go to those trade shows, get your name as like one of the best companies. And so that's what happened with us, is our name started to hit a lot of these various lists. Okay. And I started to get random phone calls, similar to what we were talking about before, like almost like a text, like, hey, would you like to sell your house?
Like, sell your house for, I'll get you the highest value. Those text messages we all get. Yeah.
I was getting, whatever this was, 20-some, or I guess at this point it was more like 14, 15 years ago. I started getting phone calls and emails and it's very similar stuff. And I'm like, they're like, hey, we love, we're super interested in buying your company, or have you ever thought about selling? And so I began like, wow, this is interesting. I didn't realize I had ended up on these lists, and that's how they were talking to me. But so my recommendation is, if you can get on those lists, try to get on those lists as early as possible, right? And start having.
Did you hire a PR someone, or you just did it? You just kind of did some research and just did it. Okay.
Yeah. And it looks a little different for every company. Like I said, a plumbing company is going to be different than a software company, but they both have their kind of networks, right? Like they, there's trade shows, there's various lists. Like we were on the Inc. 5000 list. Actually, I think between all my companies, I've been on there I want to say 20 sometimes. So it's really, really cool. Yeah. So that was a great list, right, for us to be on. But we didn't go with the intention of it. We were just proud of our company, right? Yeah. So you get on these various lists, or you go to these trade shows, you start rubbing shoulders with people and building relationships. And so I said, I'm going to take these phone calls. So I started taking the phone calls, and that's when, going back to the point about when they said, hey, listen, at some point you're going to have to exit.
Yeah.
Whether it's in the grave or you hand the keys over to somebody, how do you want to exit? And that kind of really hit me and planted that seed.
Yeah.
And I think from the minute I had that conversation, 4 years went by, and I would get these calls and emails almost daily, and probably I would entertain a phone call once a quarter. But I highly recommend that you do those phone calls. Not everyone, but just schedule them, get to know, have conversations, right? But then there was one day, Lauren, when I was. It was a great day. There was nothing wrong with the day. It was actually a really good day. But I just remembered being in my office and having this idea going, you know what? I think I personally am plateaued, and I think I'm personally at a point where I want to do something different. And I remember I kind of got up out of my chair and I'm like, I gotta see if I shake this feeling off or whatever. Yeah. And I walked around the parking lot and I went out and I sat in my car for maybe 20 minutes. And I prayed, and I thought about it, and I prayed, and I picked up the phone, and I made a call, and I started talking to investment bankers, and that started the process. And then from that moment, it was 2 years later that we actually sold.
What would you say to someone who's maybe feeling a little bit stuck, or maybe not feeling, like you said, maybe they're plateauing, but they also don't feel like they can leave their company behind? I imagine it's, you've put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into it. That's got to be a really hard decision or realization to come to.
Oh, it's extremely emotional and lonely. When I went through the process 2 times, for 2 years, I almost blew the process up 2 times because of my emotions behind it, right? Yeah. It's this is a crappy analogy, but it's kind of like sending your kid off to college. For me, I felt like I had reached a point in my life where I plateaued. I've done everything I can with my baby, right?
Yeah.
And it was time to give it to somebody else, let the baby grow. And I also felt like I needed to go to that next season of my life, right? And so there's tons of emotions. Most people feel exactly like you described, Lauren, right? Where they'll get this inside. And right now you're probably listening to this and you're like, maybe this is for me. Maybe I'm starting to get there, right? And then what happens is all the reality sets in. I don't have time for this. I don't know where to start. I don't want to talk about my crazy neighbor. All of these things, right?
Yeah. All the work that goes into even figuring this out.
Absolutely. And you go, I'll deal with it later, right? When things are better, when the economy's better, when whatever's better, right? And the problem is, this is a process, right? It's such a process and it's such a journey. And as I said, even if you don't sell, it will make you a better business person. It will make your company better. So if you're struggling with those emotions right now and all of the anxiety and the excitement, I probably just got you excited about a bunch of stuff, but then this anxiety is popping up, I'm telling you, it's going to get worse. The anxiety will get worse. It will be more stressful. It will be even harder than I describe here because you'll have your own set of issues. But you need to do it. Just like as an entrepreneur, it takes so much courage to kind of go and do that, step out and start.
Yeah.
It takes as much courage to kind of take this step too, because it is absolutely the unknown. It is absolutely difficult. Just like I've said over and over again, your first 2 years of business is so hard. Well, the second the hardest, just as hard as those 2 years, were the 2 years of selling it. And so right now, you're going, well, that sounds like a lot of work, and I'd say you're right.
Yeah.
That sounds like a lot of stress, I'd say you're right. But I'm telling you, you can't wait because this is going to happen at some point in time.
Yeah.
And like I said, if you get hit by a bus or you win the lottery, right? You win the lottery, it's going to happen.
Yeah.
Right? Maybe you get totally burned out. It's going to happen, right? Your company goes downhill. It's going to happen, right? At some point, it's going to happen. So you want to go into this playing offense rather than defense.
It's going to happen, so do it in the way make it happen in the way where you're in control of it versus where life has taken over and now that's running your sale.
You said it better than I am. When life is taken over and now you're like a fire sale and just trying to get out instead of really trying to set something up for success, everybody up for success.
Okay. So I want to ask you, because you mentioned earlier you mentioned a couple of different types of sales, which for me is like, oh, I didn't realize there were so many different sales. Like a home sale, you're like, oh, you sell your home, sell your business. How many different types of sales are there, or what are the different types?
Yeah, let's see. Off the top of my head, I think I can probably talk about 5 different ones, and in each one of these are nuanced, right?
Yeah.
So none of these 5 even look the same. Every single one's different. Whereas a home sale is like, this is where it gets more different,
Yeah.
right? A home sale is like, you go through the process, you go through escrow.
Put the offer in, do the inspection, do the appraisal, close. Is kind of it,
Yeah, and there's nuances and all of that too, right? Like depending on what pops up. But at the end of the day, you're handed cash, you hand them keys, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's very different in business, and obviously it's more complex, but it shouldn't be intimidating. So I do think it's important that you understand the types of sales. So as you start to kind of think, is this something I would want to do? You can kind of understand, like, okay, if my business is X type of business, I can expect probably Y type of process and potential buyer. And so the types of sales that I'll kind of explain is, one is, like a family or key employee sale. Okay. So this is very common in like service type industries, family lifestyle type businesses, where it's not exceptionally high growth, but it can be very high profit, but it's not a growth industry. It's also something where like it's very, that the company exists because of the people themselves, right?
Okay.
Like if the founder or 2 or 3 key employees went away, the company can kind of go away. And so these, like, you're not going to find a lot. You won't find private equity or people like that interested in something like that at all, right? They're just not interested, right?
Yeah.
Like, but if you go in like, so you have to understand that, right? And you go, well, geez, this is actually, let's say a roofing company, like. This is a great roofing company. I've owned it for 20 some years, but now my back hurts, right? And frankly, I want to go buy my place in Florida, and I want to get a boat, and while I can still enjoy it, and I'd like to get out, right? And this thing makes a ton of profit. It's maybe you're making $500,000 a year or something like that, maybe even more. And you got a great little company, right? And you're like, well, who on earth am I going to sell this thing to? Well, in my opinion, you could probably sell to a competitor, right? Someone who does something very similar to you. They understand your business. They could kind of absorb your employees. Are they going to give you the most value for it? Maybe not, right? Maybe not. But like, if you think about it, if I'm a competitor, I don't want to buy you. I just want you to quit and no one to take it over, right? Right? So like, they don't necessarily have great motivation to buy it, if they're super shrewd and they know that you don't have anyone to sell it to. I'd rather just say, I'm not paying you money, but you can retire and just go away. But a competitor could buy it. But typically something like that, it's going to be like a family type sale or a key employee. And so this type of business, like, what's going to happen is, let's say it's you're making $500,000 in profit, and they're going to pay you, I don't know, let's say 2.5 times that profit, so they're going to pay you, I don't know, $1.5 million for it. Well, maybe you even get 4 times profit. Good for you. I don't know. But let's say you get somewhere between, 1 and, let's say, for instance, let's say you get 4 times profit, right? So you get $2 million, right?
Yeah.
Well, first off, that key employee or your son-in-law or, your daughter, whatever that is, like, they're probably not sitting on $2 million,
Yeah.
right? So they got to figure out how to get you $2 million. So, they could go get an SBA loan for some of it, but they're not going to get all of it in a loan. They can probably cash out their 401ks and maybe give you like $200,000 times that $2 million. But most likely there's going to be a payout over time to you, right? And so this is kind of what happens in like key employees or family-owned businesses is like they're going to give you some money and then they're going to pay you out over time, which is okay. That's nice. You got continued cash flow, and typically it's a better it's a better tax situation for you as well.
Yeah.
Because you're not paying all that money
lump
up
sum,
front, right?
yeah.
Like you're being a lower tax bracket. So there's some really good things about it. But your contingent on you getting your paycheck, that person coming in and not screwing up your company.
Yeah.
Right. So like, there's a big string
It's a little
attached.
risky. Yeah.
So like, you have to make darn sure that you're handing them something that works, right? That you believe in, that will continue on, that they know how to run it. And so
not just dumping it, not just selling it to anybody, selling it to the right person who can keep it going.
Yeah, I get this. I've had this conversation at least 2 times in my life with friends of mine, close friends of mine, where their family members were trying to more or less, quote unquote, I'm going to use the word dump. I don't think the family member perceived it as dump, but when I looked at it and they showed me the financials and they showed me kind of the history and what they were walking into, the family was trying to dump it on them because they had gotten to the point where they were like 70 years old and they're like, we have to retire. We don't have anyone. But they're selling it, trying to sell it to my friend with some type of long-term earn-out, get my friend to cash out their 401k, and my friend's never worked in the business. Right? And then when we dug into the business, we found there was all these issues, right? They hadn't done a process. And so had they started this like 2 years earlier, found a key employee, found a family member, had that person work in the business for 2 years, make sure the person likes the business. Imagine they sell it and now imagine you're the buyer and you have this burden to make sure that your father-in-law gets a paycheck for the next 10 years, but you hate the freaking business.
Yeah.
Right? Or like this business is just eroding. Like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
That's terrible for everybody. And so like you talk about the process, this kind of 2-year process, like you want to make sure that as you're working on this, that this is something that's going to sustain, that the person who's going to buy it is going to do well, that if 2 people buy it, that they get along.
Yeah.
All of these things. Right? So last week, actually a week ago today, this is the very, very day, I was meeting with someone who came out and he did this. He bought a company like this, exactly like this, but he bought with 5 people. Sure enough, after 18 months, they had this huge fight. All of them had a fight. The whole business almost went under. They kicked him out. He ended up coming back in with lawyers, buying it back out. Anyways, it was just this fiasco, right? But like, it's going to work out. And sure enough, it was the father-in-law it was the former, the father-in-law had the money in, right? And so he's like, I got to make this work for my father-in-law. Yeah. So like, I'm not saying it's not doable, but like, let's make sure that we get it done right, so.
There's a lot more involved and it's not as easy or as simple as a sale as people probably think, not having been there.
Absolutely. And so really making sure the time, everyone believes in it, everyone's clear on the understanding of who's going to get what, how long you're going to get paid out. What happens if the business doesn't hit its numbers?
Yeah.
Like, are you still going to get the same amount? Are you guaranteed that money, or is it variable? Like, these are what happens if all of a sudden you triple the business, right? Like, so these are the type of conversations and things that you need to be prepared for when you're looking at something like a sale to a family member or key employee or something like that.
Okay.
But very doable. Not discouraging you, but go into it eyes wide open.
That's good. What other types of sales are there?
Let's kind of stay in that vein right now. There's what's called an ESOP sale, employee stock option purchase, something like that.
Okay.
ESOP. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. ESOP. This is super cool, right?
Okay.
People love this, and when I explain it to you at first, everyone's probably going to be like, ooh, I want to do that, right? And there's a lot of really great upside to it. There's some downside too, very similar kind of some of the downside I explained before, but ESOP is when you basically sell your company to the employees. Okay. But as you can imagine, the exact same situation where, let's say, and typically an ESOP's bigger than what I just described, right? So, this it's going to be, now we're talking $10 million company, bigger type companies at least. So let's say, the company's going to sell, let's say it's a $10 million top line company. Let's say it's going to sell to you for, you're going to walk away and they're going to give you $20 million, just for easy math, right? So, your employees, let's say you have 100 employees. Those 100 employees don't all go and pull their money and come up with $20 million. They hand you a check for $20 million.
Yeah.
what happens is someone's got to come up with the $20 million. Well, what happens is typically a bank will loan against that. And one of the nice things is sometimes you'll even get a little more generous of a multiplier. And we don't really have time to explain why, but they'll give you a little more of a generous multiplier sometimes on an ESOP. But what's going to happen is that bank's going to say, okay, great, of the $20 million, we're going to give you a $20 million valuation, but I'll give you $5 million in cash, which means the company is, so you walk away with $5 million in cash, and then the company is going to owe you $15 million on top of that, right? So you walk away with $5 million in cash. Well, where did that money come from? Well, that $5 million that you take came from a bank that loaned it to the company.
Yeah.
So what happens is you actually become the guarantor on that $5 million, and the company's a guarantor. Okay. So kind of you just took out a $5 million loan.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah. So but there's some advantage here. Now the companies own, whatever that is, 25%. You still own 75%, right? Because of $15 million, right?
Yeah.
And then they're going to figure out how to get, so now you have $5 million, so the company slowly pays back that loan, and then they get more loans, and slowly over time they pay you back. But every time you're guaranteeing that loan, okay? So you're really getting the cash out front. The company theoretically is paying the debt. So as long as the company is a great company and pays all the debt, it works.
Yeah.
And over this whole long process of time, you eventually turn the keys over to the employees. Now, the problems with this are, as I just explained, and there's a lot of problems. None of them that can't be overcome. Is the one you're kind of, basically just taking out a loan, right? Because you're signing as a guarantor. Yeah. Two, the company's got to be good enough to make sure that it continues to pay the loan and can make. Like I said, they're probably not going to give you the full $20 million up front. So then you got to get the other $15 million out in some fashion as well. So this takes time. Again, the tax advantage is unbelievable here, right? Because there's some risk. What they do is if you take that money and you literally, let's say they give you $5 million, and you take that $5 million and you put it into small mid-cap companies in the stock in the market, you pay no tax. That's incredible. Yeah. Imagine selling, because I'm going to tell you, later on we're going to talk about how you're going to get the tax crap down there.
How you actually get the money.
Yeah, right, yeah. But in this scenario, literally, you get it tax-free because it goes straight into the market. Now, eventually when you sell those stocks, you're going to pay tax. But it's this incredible facility that works so well, right? So there's huge upside with that. The other upside is great. You literally built something that you're turning over to your employees. But in the middle of this, all of a sudden there's lots of governance that goes on, because now all of a sudden, guess what? You've got 100 stockholders. Yeah. Right? And they don't always get along. Yeah. Right? And those stockholders work in the company. Yeah. So it's
they're sharing a fridge.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it can be messy, but it's super cool in the end. It's just a bit of a rocky road to get there. And it's a whole process, right? Once the sale happens, it takes a while for you to get all your money out. But like I said, there's a lot of tax advantages for it. There's some great legacy stuff. A lot of entrepreneurs get very excited about the ESOP. But it also, when I talk about governance, it becomes expensive, right? Because now you're going to have to pay for governance and auditing, right? Now all of a sudden you have to have audits, right? Whereas you've never paid for an audit in your life, right? Now you're having to pay, to have accountants come in every year and do this auditing and all of these different things. But it's the right way to do it. It's not, I'm not trying to discourage you from it, because there's a ton of upside to do it. Yeah. And, and also, if you're not a high growth company, this is something that, could be sexy for people to buy, right? Maybe private equity or whatever, they're not interested in you because it's not a high growth company. Yeah. But it's a good, stable company. It's going to be there forever. So who are your buyers? Your competitors are an ESOP. So I think it's a very good option for the right type of folks.
how do you even start, like, how do you even ask the employees if they'd be interested in that? How?
Yeah, first off, you probably don't, right? Like,
Yeah.
you really want to go down and vet this out and ask yourself all the questions. And then afterwards, you kind of present it to them, and it's a benefit, right?
Okay.
So the great thing from the employees is there's nothing, like all the employee has to do is show up every day and work, right?
Because again, they're not putting down $1 million of the 5 million or
Yeah.
the 20 million.
Right. And so what happens is it becomes a huge benefit for them. Just like, having a 401k and having health insurance. It's like not only all this, but you also as an employee, you own part of this company. So when we make profit, you get dividends on top of it,
Yeah.
right? So like you don't have to necessarily sell it to the employees, but I would tell you, before you go down and start having these conversations, you want to know all the potential pitfalls, because you don't want to, kind of stir your employees up and think, hey, this is going to happen, and then you pull the rug out from underneath them. Yeah. So, and like I said, it's more of it's more the people you got to sell are the bank, right? You got to sell the bank, and you've got to make sure that it all makes sense, and then get the right valuation, and then figure out what's the pay structure and how you're going to get paid out, and how much cash can you get out up front, and if you get that much cash out, how much are you giving up in equity? Because like I said, most of the time it's not 100% overnight. It's a slow roll, slow process of it. But it does offer, like, again, this could be something where it's like, hey, that's fine. Over the course of 10 years want to be out, but I would like to work in the company for the next 10 years. It's kind of a cool process, right? Like it kind of works where in the beginning you give up like 20%, and then you give up 40%, and then at this point 80%, and then you feel very comfortable walking away. And maybe at the end you still are a significant owner in the company even.
Okay, what's another sale?
So again, kind of going on the smaller side. So there's like business brokers. Maybe you get emails like this, oftentimes like, hey, buy this company. They'll sell stuff like laundromats, and they'll sell, those type of companies, but they'll also sell, smaller service type businesses and mom and pop businesses in general that are probably under $5 million. And where, private equity or investment bankers, people like that just aren't interested. And it's going to be more of these, you look around, you go, I don't have someone to buy my business, and ESOP doesn't work for me. I need to go to market, right?
Yeah.
I need to get a real estate agent, right? Like I'm not going to sell the house to my kid. I'm not going to sell it to my neighbor. So I need to get a real estate agent.
Yeah.
So this would be like a business broker. And they're going to come in and they're going to offer you some limited services. They're going to give you a valuation. They're going to put it on a bunch of websites. So handle kind of your vetting out of folks so that you don't talk to every crazy that, answers the ad. They'll make sure people sign NDAs. They'll make sure that they'll help you get your books in general order, like, because they want it to look pretty. Just like
they're taking commission from the sale.
Absolutely, right? So just as you think about, like a good real estate agent is going to be like, yeah, you know what? I'll hold an open house for you. I'm going to give you some advice here. We're going to, put in a sliding door here, or, we're going to repaint. They're going to offer that general type advice. They're not going to do, this isn't crazy hands-on stuff. They're probably going to take, I don't know, 6 to 10% maybe-ish, depending on the size of the sale. They're going to take a nice commission because it's a good amount of work for them, but they're not going to do everything. It's not total full service. But they're going to, that's their day job, selling a house. Could you sell your house? Sure, you can sell your house, but it's not your day job, right?
Do I know how to? No, not really. but
this is their day job, right?
This is what they know.
Yeah, and when it comes time to negotiating, they'll help you with that. And valuation, and then, the buyer comes along, they're like, hey, I want to buy this, but I don't, I can come up with 20%, but I don't know where I'm going to get the rest. They can say, they can point the buyer in the right direction. So, they're kind of like matchmaking and helping to put together. So, very viable option for, the smaller type companies. And so pretty self-explanatory. And I would go this route if I didn't have kind of a built-in buyer and I was a smaller company.
Okay. What's next?
Yeah. So kind of moving up the ladder a little bit.
Yeah.
The next would be a search fund.
Okay.
And what these are, they're very interesting. I think they work out really well. This is more of like 5 million plus. Sometimes they'll go smaller if it's the right industry. So these you're going to get would probably be people reaching out to you. The email is going to be something like this, like, hey, I'm an entrepreneur myself. I'm looking to buy a business and run it. Okay. And so it's a little different than, say, like private equity, venture capital, anything like that. And what they're doing is they're trying to self-source a business, and they have money behind them. So this is oftentimes 2 or 3 types of people. One, they are, Harvard MBA, someone that, has some decent experience, maybe worked in the business world for 4 or 5 years, has a good degree, an MBA, an impressive individual, and they go to folks, maybe like me, and they'll say, hey, I want you to invest in me, right? And they'll say, they'll find a bunch of people, and maybe they'll raise like, $10, $20 million or something like that. And then they'll say, take that $10 or $20 million and go and find a certain type of company, right? So I get these all the time where they're like, hey, I want to buy your company and I want to run it. And how are they going to pay for it? They're going to pay for it with the fund that they have, the search fund that they have behind it. But it's just them and it's just the money behind them. So like there's people in the world that like if they ever approached me and said, hey, Dee, I want to go and do this. Like I believe in them. I know them really well.
Yeah.
I'll bet on them, right? But I'm going to take a percentage, right? So I've known people like this and they do this. And I think it's a very good option. And I would not disregard this as an option. You probably won't get top value, right? Because you're not going to run a full process like you would with an investment banker and getting outside bids and people like that. And if they did get in a bidding opportunity, they're not going to pay up. Like they're typically, I'm not going to tell you they're not going to give you a real valuation, but they're looking to buy something slightly under market. And then they want to run it and they want to do kind of a better job than you did, right? And that's what the folks behind them are banking on, right? So I don't exactly know like what percentage they would own versus their backers, but the backers are own the primary part, and this guy or this gal's job is to go in there, buy something slightly under market, and then drive it and grow it.
Okay.
And maybe they drive it and grow it and own it for the next 20 years, or maybe they drive it and grow it and sell in 5 years. You don't really know. Each one of them have their own kind of agenda. But it's basically, that's what a search fund is. So.
Okay. Any other types of sales we haven't hit on yet?
So the rest I would fall under the category of investment banker-led sales. This is more of what, when you're reading headlines of like, or you hear somebody like saying, oh, they sold for $40 million or they sold for $130 million or whatever. Like these are where kind of when investment bankers get involved. They typically, they're probably looking at not getting involved in selling something for less than like $20 million, right? Okay. Maybe they go down a little bit lower. Maybe it's, $10, $15 million depending. But investment bankers are looking for selling companies for, 20 million, north of 20 million, right? Typically. And the name is misleading. This threw me off for years. They call themselves investment bankers, and really what they are is kind of business brokers, right? Okay. Very similar, but they call themselves, I don't know why they call this, like I know there's this whole history behind it, but like, I'm like, oh, why don't you just call yourself salespeople, right? But they like the name of investment banker, right? They're not investing anything, and they're not a bank, right? So, all right, I don't know how you came up with the name, but investment banker is someone that's going to approach you. These are the phone calls that I used to get all the time, and they're going to pitch you on why they can take your company to market and sell it for the top dollar, right? And these people are very full service. Like they're going to come in and, if your books are in order, like they're going to bring in people and they're going to help you put your books in order. They're really very, very, very hands-on because, the dollars and cents are up there, right? Like they're going to take, 3 to 6% probably. So these are big tickets, right? They're typically not walking away. They're not doing a deal that someone doesn't make, that they don't make at least $1 million on, at least, So like there's some big, big money behind this. So they are very motivated, highly motivated. And they'll talk to you for 4 or 5 years before you even decide, right? And a good one will educate you. A good one will help answer a lot of these questions you probably are having right now that you're jotting down more questions. They'll help you understand the market. They're going to tell you, this is a type of multiple we think you can get, and this is why. Typically what I do is I have relationships with several investment bankers, and I have conversations until I'm ready to sell. And then at that point, I have them all present on why they're the best ones. I've narrowed them down in the meantime. But then I'll pick the one that I like the best, that I like to work with, that I think gets me, understands me, someone that I want to talk to every day. Because you're going to talk to these people 2-3 times a day, right? It's a huge process, right? Like, and you're going to do it for years. Like I was talking to my investment banker a couple of times a day for 2 years straight. So like you got to get people that that, and what they're going to do is they're going to take you to market, right? And so there's kind of like, a few different ways, people that they will sell you to as an investment banker, but part of their process will be, who are your buyers, right? Like, or is now even a good time to go to market, right? A good one's going to tell you, be honest with you and be like, you know what? Do these 2 or 3 things and let's come back to market this time next year, right? Like they're going to help you. A good one's really going to help you. Like a good real estate agent, like a lot of real estate agents are going to, their answer is, when's the best time to sell? Always now, right? But I really do, and I don't mean to make a sweeping generalization because a lot of people don't do that, but like a great investment banker is going to give you tons of insights on how to time it, when the right time is, what competitors are going for, all of these different things that will help you make a great decision. And also, like I said, understand, this process. They will bring to you different types of buyers. They'll bring to you probably competitors that are interested in buying you. They'll bring to you private equity that are interested in buying you. And then depending on how big, they eventually ultimately could even take you public, right? Which is kind of like the dream, we have an IPO. I personally don't necessarily think that's a dream for a lot of reasons, but a lot of people, that's their dream, right? So that's kind of going down this round. That is working with an investment banker. And then even on the public, like there's oftentimes A round, B round, C round, D round, E round, 4 or 5 rounds before you go public. Each time it's different group of buyers that come in. Investment bankers lead that process. You can imagine how hard it is to run your company on a day-to-day basis, much less try to sell a company of that size and magnitude that we're talking about. And so investment bankers should be experts in saying, you run your business, we'll run the process, right? And so that's what an investment banker is. And so those are kind of that, and like I said, within that are kind of the baked-in buyers that they would bring. So that, and kind of, I can put a bow on it and tell you that's kind of what you would look at,
Okay. Well, I think we're at time right now, but there's still probably a lot to discuss. I feel like we've just only skimmed the surface of what actually is involved in a sale. So,
I would summarize it is a journey, right? And I'd even liken it to a race, right? But it's the reason why you want to spend so much time on this ahead of time is so you know the race you're running.
Yeah.
Are you doing a 100-yard dash? Are you doing because you're going to train differently depending on the type of race, right? Like who the buyer is, where the finish line is, when the finish line is. You're going to train differently for a marathon. All these different things. This is a journey, and so not to rush it. Make sure that you prep yourself in the right way to get the outcome that you want.
So for the next episode, we'll go to the next step in the sale. Set the stage for us. What's it going to look like?
The next part is going to be like, once you kind of know your business, you know the potential buyer, that you're looking at. Great. Let's try to. What do we need to do to maximize value? Like, how do I get, if I'm going to take this thing to market, how do I make sure that I'm getting the most for me and my family at the end of the day? And so that's what we're going to talk about, how to maximize your value in this next one. So
sounds good.
Thank you. This was fun. Thank you. Thanks Lauren.